Let me connect, no, my SQL Server. In the SQL Server database, I have distinguished between ordinary users and administrators. No? It's not authors, it's users. It's in the table called users. This is like the table we have used in our previous class. No? So dito, we have an administrator field, which is set to true if the user is an administrator. And we have an active and lock out. No? So we can lock out users, we can unlock them out. And then if they're locked out, we can set this to false. No? False na lang natin muna itong administrator. A null can be converted into false. We'll say is null false. So yeah, kung active siya, they will be allowed to log in. Okay. So for example, if admin logs in, he will have a different functionality. Meron siyang author management like this. No? He can edit files or he can edit tables. Okay. Now, if he logs out, no, an ordinary user, like for example, user 1, will not have that functionality. No? We plan to have cart, no, a borrower's cart, because this is a borrow or a book library, from where you can borrow and return books. You can have your borrower's cart and then approve them, then you can return them. That's what we are going to do. You will have a home, we have about, then when you log out, uh, you will be brought back to the login page. Now, if you use, for example, an admin functionality like authors.aspx, no? So you'll be disallowed. This is by using session variables, which I've shown you last time. You'll be disallowed. However, if you have admin, you log in as admin, and you want to go directly to the authors page, which is an admin functionality reserved for admin users, no? Authors. Uh, pwede, diba? Or you can also click this here, no? We will have book classifications, book titles. We will have user management. This footer is the footer for will store the menu for the admin functionality. The above, no, the above menu will be the plain users functionality like viewing of books, no, borrowing of books, and returning of books. So I've shown you how to print. No, you can print, no, the list of authors, which is using our traditional RDLC report generator, which we have used in our last semester. No? So ganyan. This is a very functionality unique to ASP.NET. Ang hirap nito gagawin sa Laravel or Django. Wala silang ma-report generator. You'll have to use a PDF writer, which is very difficult to use. Dito pwede ka mag-print. You can save as PDF or you can send this to your printer. My report generator. That's one of the most important functionalities. Now remember that when we print to another tab, so that we can go back, no, to the previous tab like that. Okay, you follow? Now in this tab you remain logged in as administrator. So you can, if you go to home, sorry, dalawang tuloy. Dapat sila. Okay, so you still have the same admin functionality. Okay, until you log out. Any questions so far? No? So last meeting we have discussed the functionality, the use of session variables. Let me open the previous Here's the simple project which we have used. Off ko muna ito. We have created a simple login project. Wala pa tayo masyadong CSS, no? Ayan, login v1. It's not it. simple login again. So created from scratch. Okay. Okay. So let's run this. So this is simple user control such that uh, users, anong nangyari? Bakit may tumakbo? Dito, no? Oh, is it here? Dito pala sa kabila. So ito, no? Then you say admin or user 1. User 1, login. Okay. So you have this. You have the about page. You can go to the about page. You can go back. Then here it is, no? You can also go to the home page. But then if you're logged out, no? If you're logged out, can you go to the home page right away? Hindi pwede, no? It forces you to go back to login. You can go back to admin. So this is a functionality that requires user login. If you are logged in, so let's say as a correct user, only then are you set to the. We can still improve this. There are pages that will allow access to certain. There are websites which allow access to certain pages even without user login, like the previous one that I've shown. So logout. Ito yung simple. This is the simplest project which we have shown because every web page should have like something like that, no? Like when you go Lazada, for example, or Shopee. So let's look at the no. Let's look at the simple login. So we were using server controls, no, not HTML controls, and we have identified them separately as HTML controls being static controls, which means they cannot be edited during runtime. We cannot control them during runtime. And the ASP.NET controls are controls which are dynamic controls, which means during runtime we can control how they behave. So this is our login page. Then meron tayong, this is a text box, ASP.NET text box. It's a plain label, and this is an ASP.NET login button. This is not an HTML button. You can shift between design view and source view, no? Okay. To add components, to add elements, you can go to the toolbox, no? So buttons, okay. For example, you can drag a button there like that, no? So that when you go to the source view, you now have a new button. Or from the source view itself, you can also add uh, uh, components, no, or rather controls. Like you can add a checkbox like that, no, and drag it there. When you go to the design page, it's already there. Sometimes it's much easier to put them when you're in source view because you can put them on the most correct position, no, like that. Okay, so that's how we program in ASP.NET. We can drag from the toolbox certain controls, no? So these are standard controls which you can put in your web page. There are also HTML controls, no? Let's go back to let's go find HTML. Ito, HTML, no? When you put a button, what's the difference between an HTML button, ito, no? Input. So input ID is a bot. Input is of type button. You know what this is, right? Alam niyo ito, input ID which is of type button. This is an HTML button. Okay? The other button which we are using is an ASP.NET button. Okay? What's the difference? The HTML button is static. We cannot control. So dito lang pwede natin malagay ang on-click dito. But once the on-click is there, it's only on the client side. Which means we cannot control how it occurs on the client side anymore. We can only control it during design time, not during runtime. No? When the web page is actually running. That's the main difference between client-side programming and server-side programming. Okay. Client-side programming, we are using HTML controls, no? Static type, which means they cannot dynamically change during runtime. In server-side programming, we are using ASP controls, which means they are dynamic and which we can control during after runtime. Okay? Do you follow? No? I hope you understand. No? So ito, HTML button. No? This button is an ASP button. Do you follow? Okay? So if you have an HTML, you also have a code behind. Like if you have a Windows form, you have a code behind. How do you look for the code behind? The login.aspx is the code, is the HTML code. aspx.cs, ito no? Can you see that? No? There, it's below. This is the code behind. Okay? So for example, we have, if you look at the login.aspx login button, no? The login button, this button, it will have an event handler for click, for the click event. I hope you can see that it's here, no? btn login click. You can double click on this, and you will be brought uh, to the code behind. Okay, so dito natin i-control. Okay, we were using our traditional global static files, no, to connect SQL. Okay, why are we doing that? Because we don't want to repeat code in every web page where we connect to the database. So nandito gumamit tayo ng static ano. I have explained this to you before. Okay, you can just visit. It's in our Dagler site. By the way, all these codes are in our Dagler site. Our Dagler site. Nandito lahat ito sa Dagler, no? Sobra na ito dapat nandito ang program codes, no? Okay. Storing the connection to the web config file. So nandito yung sample web config file with a connection. Ito yung connection string. We follow it's in JSON syntax. Then there it is, no? The static global.cs class, no? Nandito. Okay, which you can move to your project and you can include by doing a right click. I will try to do that again. And then you have the login.aspx page. Ito. And then you have the login.aspx.cx. Okay. Ito yung aspx.cs. This is the code behind. Do you follow? So let's look at the code behind. The code behind is used, in this case, used to control the behavior of the login button. Okay, ito. How do we, how does the login button behave? You follow? Because nalo sir. Nalo sir. What else? Wala ang chat. Anyway, we will control the login page. Let's explain how we control it. So ganito lang. First, we are going to use the get the username. TXT username is actually a text box. It's also uh, uh, an ASP.NET control. It's not an HTML input. Now, if you use an HTML input, you cannot access that HTML input in the code behind. Do you follow? So you have to do the code on the on click or on the on any event, but it will be visible in the client side, di ba? client side. And this is a server side. Do you follow? So the txt username, and then we'll also check the password. If they're both blank, we will not allow the login. So we have a response.write. Response.write, we will write a script. This is a JavaScript, no? Okay. We'll send a JavaScript. When you say response.write, it will include an HTML code. No? It will include an HTML code on that particular portion of your web page. In this script case, we will include a script. Okay. So if you run this, you will see that uh, username and password will be required. Pag mag-login ka, usually you have that star, no? Indicate that with a star. But anyway, it's okay. You can do that. Pag login ka with a blank, ano, it will issue an error message. Okay? So ito lang yun. If they're both, if you trim them and they're both empty, we issue a script, an alert, a JavaScript alert. Okay? If they're satisfied, no? The values are satisfied, we are going to check the username and the password against our SQL table. Okay? So we say select ID user administrator, no? From users where username is equal to a password. And sometimes we'll have to include, no? Active, no? Last. And is null active 0 is equal to 1. Follow? No? Para only active users are created. Okay? Now, what we do is, let's run this. So, mga inactive users, hindi kasali, no? So, the administrator can deactivate users. User 1 is an active user. User 1 is the password. Okay. Now, let's add of course, you can still specify this further, no? To issue a message, no? Which tells the user that it's an inactive user, no? Okay. And then we have, okay, ID user, kukunin natin, dapat ilalagay natin yung session, no? Yung username ng session, okay? Do you follow? Now, there's another way to do this. You can say, first, we get the user ID, no? We can add this, we can add session user, ID user ba? Yes, ID user equal to PS tables 0 dot row rows 0 dot 0. Let me get this from my from my other code, no? Kasi medyo mahabang code. We will copy it from there, no? It's the login. Ito na. Okay. Ito. You follow? Session variables. We get it from table 0, row 0, 0. That's how to get the no. Row 0, 0. Why 0? Because the data set will come as an array. 0 being the first field, which is ID user. 1 being the second field, which is username. And third uh, being the third field, which is administrator. You follow? So we can just copy this. We go to our simple project. What we'll do is we'll save the session variables, the user ID, the username, and the administrator, no? Because so that we can distinguish whether the user is an administrator or not. And then we redirect to the home ASPX page. Now, otherwise, we'll just write a script now. We'll issue a script that it is an invalid login. Okay, and uh, we can remove, no? We should remove the session variables. Okay? Dapat i-remove natin ang session variables. In case there's ano, no? So how do we do that? We'll have create a clear, no? There are two ways to remove session variables. You can remove them individually, or you can clear them all right at once. You can clear them using the abandon procedure, no? You can remove them one by one. You can say session user ID. User ID ba? Yes, that's user ID. Dot remove. Sometimes it's good to be selective, no? Capital yata ang remove. Oh, yes, it's capital. Then we'll have session username. Username ba? Yes. Capital N. This is case sensitive, by the way, no? Remove. Capital R. Session administrator. Remove. Ito po lang lumabas. Anyway, malaman natin yan later, no? Or the simple way is session dot abandon. Ganyan, no? Abandon means it will clear all variables, no? That's one way. But sometimes you need to be selective, no? Let's check why this is. There are errors. Where's the error? Kulang pala ng ano. Okay. That's why may error kanina. Anyway, Visual Studio will. It's good to put the clear session in the beginning of the login. This that clear session variables. Bakit wala? Let's find out now. Clear session variables. Void. Let's put a void. Okay. This that clear session variables. Okay. Ayan na siya. Sa pag-log out din, will also it's good, but anyway, we have already cleared. No? Sa log out, talagyan din natin siya ng clear session variables. Okay. Let's look at home. Itong log out, no? So, wala tayong access sa clear session variables here, so we'll just copy that one from login.aspx. We're duplicating code. I'm not sure if you can put this in globals, no? Pwede kaya? Lagay daw natin, no? Ito na lang. Public. Let's try this anyway. Payag siya. May X, oh. Anyway. And then we'll go to login. Let's run this first. Static. Public static. Pwede kaya ito? let's look at login. Parang hindi ata ito pwede because you will not have an access of session. No? You cannot have you cannot do so hindi talaga ito pwede. Hindi siya papayag dito. You cannot access session variables in a static class. So there's no way we can align this. So we need to repeat, which means we need to repeat this in every page. Okay. So, you follow? So it's about page kasi no, in the home page, okay, we will have a logout. No? Dito sa logout, we are going to remove everything. So we'll just copy all sessions. I mean, no? All session variables. Let's copy this. Okay. Then we'll say this dot clear session variables. Okay. So talagang kailangan natin i-repeat ang clear. Okay. Why are we doing this? So that the session variables are cleared and then we are sure that the user is or logged out in our system. Do you follow? Because we will know that the user is logged in if there's a session variable called username. Okay? So what's a session variable? A session variable is a variable unique to every user on every browser that he's using. Do you follow? So if I'm going to log in on a unique instance, for example, in one Google Chrome, I'm going to log in as administrator, that's one session. If I'm going to use the same Chrome browser to log into another user, the username will switch, okay, to the new username because they are on the same session. However, if I'm going to use another Google Chrome instance and then log in there separately, that will be a separate username. No? So one instance of a browser will give you one session. Okay? Any questions so far? So you may ask, in the past, we use the username and the user ID is placed in the globals file. Can we save it in the globals file so that it can be accessed by anyone? The problem is that when you put a global variable in the globals file, the global variable will be the same for all users of the server, all users connected to the server, which means whether they are using separate sessions or not, they will have the same value. So if you put the username on the globals file, all users will have the same username. No? They follow, which we do not like. I hope you understand. No? What is a session variable? A session variable is a variable unique to every session on a particular instance of a browser. No? Kung separate instance ng browser, that's a separate session. Okay? Do you follow? No? Okay, now pangit yung ating yung ating page. Okay? Kasi walang CSS. Okay? Walang CSS. Okay? Let's put some CSS later. Anyway, we will put a CSS on our main page. Let's do that, no? Mag-open muna ako ng ibang let me open another project kasi nandun yung we'll now put CSS. No? Sorry. Any questions so far? No? I'm just reviewing our previous lectures. No? Now I'm going to introduce Bootstrap CSS.